First of all, I bring the sincere apologies from my mate Bill Scott, who could not make it because he's getting treatment for a nasty prang that his horse had with the fence that Bill got wrapped up in. But many of you know Bill from other areas and previous conferences and stuff, so Bill sends you his best wishes. Right, into it. There he is. Old Bill Shakespeare always says things better than anyone else can, and I think we're at the stage now. Just when we thought we could relax, we're back in the fight. Okay, Richard, next slide. The thing 17 years ago, I suppose it is, that got us all going was the Curra River proposed development. Can you read that?
Yep.
So just go through it quickly. It involved a proposal for 3,000 hectares of irrigated cotton. They wanted to extract 42,000 megalitres per year by water harvesting. They already had existing licences of equivalent to 5,000 megalitres. Two very alarming aspects of their proposal involved that they were going to take water at exceptionally low flows, as you can see there. When they had 2 pumps going, they would be extracting 400 megalitres a day from a 1,400 megalitre flow. Anyone can see that. That's 29% of the low flow. I mean, absolute disaster, that aspect. They proposed 25,000 megalitres of shallow storage, and I did the maths and worked out that was going to cover a little bit more than 5 square kilometres at 4.5 metre depth, which is the maximum allowable if you've got a 5 metre wall. They were going to build a diversion channel 700 metres long and 9 metres deep to their pump station. 9 metres deep, of course, anyone who knows that country, that was basically down to about the level of the standing waterhole level. So they're going to take flow straight off, and they're going to put that through the middle of the stock route. I mean, there are arguments about that too. The dreams of possible future, horticulture and aquaculture, and the perpetrators of this grand scheme were those villains you see written on the bottom there. The O'Brien brothers, Waldring and Hawkins. And they came from Narromine and Warren, New South Wales. Next, thanks, Richard. Yep, excellent. Very shortly, in fact, 10 minutes after they announced their proposal, David Brooke called for suggestions that we should have a fighting group to oppose this, and we still thank you, David, for that. It was wonderful. You got that going, and we formed the Coopers Creek Protection Group, and as you can see, they're local, mainly local Windorah, and occasionally residents from as far down the stream as Inaminka. They're pastoral managers and pastoralists of the Channel Country. And the goals, early on we decided the goals were to preserve the ecological integrity of the Cooper and its wetlands, because we recognised that there were some good, traditional, sustainable industries there that depended on that ecological integrity. And you see them there: pastoralism, organic beef production, tourism, very big, very important one. And of course the fundamental plank was the opposition to irrigation or intensive agriculture or any other damaging activities that threaten the landscape integrity or water flows. And we did get involved in an argument with Main Roads, who were building a road across the Cooper channels down near Durham Downs, and we actually won that one too. It was rather good. They lowered the road. The road was going to be a bank that stopped the flood, basically, at low floods. Next one, thanks, Richard. Now, to understand this thing, let's look at a little bit of basic hydrology. We had to sort of pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and learn this stuff. Now, I think many people's eyes glaze over when they hear of megalitres and thousands of megalitres and the fact that the megalitre is 1 million litres and so on. And at the time, people were casting around for a relevant comparison. And I have only just...
You're right, heaps of time.
Oh, yeah, good. Excellent, yeah. I had only just thought of this in the last week. I wish I'd thought of it 17 years ago. in the Western country, in the Channel country, everyone knows waterholes, and waterholes are so important. They're the refuge during droughts. They're what your cattle need. So imagine a waterhole, 60 metres wide. I tried to make it as realistic as possible. Across the top, 5 metres deep, 40 metres wide across the bottom. This is just kind of an idealised waterhole, so it's got a bank slope of 1 and 2. Now that waterhole would be, in anyone's language, a bloody good waterhole if you were a pastoralist and if you were any aquatic species that wanted somewhere for refuge, or a terrestrial species for that matter. And so I did the calculations. That to hold 1,000 megalitres would have to be 4 kilometres long. Now that's a bloody good hole. I've got a waterhole in Springfield about 3 kilometres long and nowhere near that deep except one part in the middle. It's about 5 metres deep, and it's a permanent, what you'd regard as a permanent hole. For some reason or other, water holes in these systems don't evaporate at the standard evaporation rate. Now that would be so 1,000 megalitre water hole be nice to have on your property, and nice for the as refuges for biodiversity. What these characters at Windorah were proposing would have been the water they wanted to take would have filled a water hole 188 kilometres long. Just imagine that. Now I think that puts it a bit in perspective about these megalitres and stuff. Now, the issue has come up a bit about small scale and so on. So I thought, what might be small scale? Well, just for the hell of it, I picked 250 megalitres. But even a 250 megalitre water hole would be, with those dimensions, be a kilometre long. That would be a bloody good hole on anyone's place, if it was that deep all the way. So this makes me question this small scale stuff entirely now. Like 250 megalitres doesn't sound much, but if you think of a water hole a kilometre long and 5 metres deep, that changes the perspective a bit. A few basic statistics, which I, of course, always love, because early on in the arguments it was all about what water was available and what they could do with it, or what we didn't want them to do with it. And rapidly we had to look at the hydrology of the Cooper system. Curra, where the property they bought, had a gauge there, operated for quite a few years. And the statistics are there. As you can see, there's 3.12 cubic kilometres of water is the average annual flow past Curra. By the time it gets to Nappermary, it's down to 1.35. You can see there's a huge thing the engineers call transmission loss there. But that transmission loss is actually an ecosystem gain, because that water that is apparently lost is not lost, it's stimulating the ecosystems further down. It's very variable, as you can see by those statistics, and anyone who knows coefficients of variation and so on will know that any coefficient of variation above 1 is very high. And as you see, by the time it gets to Nappermary, it's exceptionally variable. And also very skewed. That means the means are influenced by unusual events, particularly like the 1974 flood. Now that's very high coefficient of skew. Likewise, a skew coefficient of 1 is pretty high. These are in the 3s. But a much more reliable statistic is the median. You see what a different story that is. Median Windorah only 1.419 cubic K. A cubic K, by the way, is 1 million megalitres. Down to Parole Nappermary, only 368,000 megs. And then it's got another 400 K to get from Nappermary to Lake Eyre. Or somewhere like that, I think. And so, compared to that, 47,000 megalitres is actually 12.8%. That's the water they would have taken per year. 12.8% of the median flow at Nappermary and 3.3% of the median flow at Curra. So the value of looking at medians, of course, is that median is exactly halfway down the distribution, the 50th percentile. And when you think of a median, it should make you think that half of the flows are going to be even lower than that. So that, but these blokes want to impose a fixed demand, and so they'd be taking their water whether it was above median or below median flow. So some years they would have been taking a bloody large percentage of the total flow. Next one, thanks, Richard. Rapidly we discovered that we had wonderful allies, particularly in the conservation groups. There, those two conservation groups, the ACF and the QCC, and the Australian science community, ecological science community, and for me at least, and for all of us, I think in the Kyabra Creek Protection Group, it was wonderful to meet people like Richard, who was with us right from the scratch, Jim Puckridge, Stuart Bunn, Angela. I mean, we had wonderful support, and I just like to pay tribute to that support, and here it is, still going. There were lots of other supporters, you know, people who'd worked and lived in the Channel Country, had, you know, the old ringers and drovers and bush poets. Two great bush poets wrote poems about that battle. One was Kelly Dixon, who, those of you who love horses might know that Kelly wrote Leave Him in the Long Yard. Another was Bruce Simpson, a marvellous old drover, pack horse drover. And we got a lot of phone calls from disgruntled residents of the cotton growing areas in New South Wales and Gundawindi in Queensland and Dalby. And then partly, I think, through Richard's good offices, we met the wonderful people of the Macquarie Marshes Environmental Landholders Association and the Paroo River Association and so on. And last but not least, tourism operators. And everybody can see why a tourism operator has the same, must regard the ecological integrity of these rivers as paramount. Because who wants to come and look at a buggered up river? And I think in the future, myself, you know, no matter what the vicissitudes of other sort of industries like pastoralism and so on, and I hope they go on well into the future, but as the world population increases and the wild spaces available for people to look at and get nurtured by their contact with natural environment, as they shrink every year, then Australia is sitting on a magnificent potential asset in the Lake Eyre Basin. I just hope silly bloody politicians don't bugger it up. And we had generally positive media, and there was overwhelming support from the Australian public generally. Right, Richard? Yeah. Now, this is a good quick one. The irrigation lobby were the Curra partners themselves. Don't know what Queensland's doing there. Anyway, the Queensland Queensland should go down the next line. Queensland Cotton Industry Policy Council, Queensland Irrigators Council, and a small group of irrigation aspirants from upstream subcatchments, but they were fairly quiet then. Interestingly, the Australian Cotton Foundation remained neutral in that battle because they did not really approve of extending. They had enough bad publicity with pesticides and problems with communities already, and there was a tacit agreement actually that if we didn't bag cotton as such, they wouldn't support development at Windorah. So that was rather good. Next one, thanks, Richard. What is it? Good, yeah. Now, the Department of Natural Resources, of course, instituted a process which is only reasonable. It was the first water management process or planning process in Queensland, so we kicked that off. That was interesting. It started off being called a water allocation plan. Not sure whether the department intended to change that word, but we kicked up a hell of a fuss about that because it presupposes they're going to allocate water. It's changed then to a water management plan, but not a water allocation and management plan. So people used to say it became a WIMP, not a WOMP. This was supported by a fair bit of hydrological modelling for the Cooper, where that was possible because there are stream gauges, particularly in the upper reaches of the Cooper system. They're very scarce though, downstream. But the modelling process, it had been criticised on certain scientific grounds of the IQ-QM model, I believe, and that's fair enough. But nevertheless, I found in the long run that it did demonstrate some interesting phenomena. And the department formed the Coopers Creek Advisory Party, as I said, with the usual suspects, particularly including South Australia. There was a contingent from South Australia strong, so large that Trevor Wright used to fly them up to the meetings. There's Trevor around? No. Not yet, yeah. Oh, and there's Trevor Whiteville, yeah, beauty. But Trevor Wright used to fly the people up. There were 2 conservation representatives, QCC and Australian Conservation Foundation. The noisy rabble from Windorah, of course, well represented, as well as the cotton growers and their policy council and that sort of stuff. It was a fairly broad party. However, after much lobbying, we found that we came up against a brick wall. There was a refusal to include ecological science input. The department seemed to think at that time, and perhaps under ministerial direction, that hydrological modelling was sufficient and we didn't need ecology. So, as I said, the departmental subculture seemed to us to reflect the ministerial views. And this is not meant as is Howard there? Good on you, Howard. This is not Howard. This might sound a bit critical, but I've got to say, Howard was always a wonderfully approachable and friendly minister. Never had a problem. We didn't have to go through a wall of minders and stuff. And you know, I appreciated knowing Howard and still do, Howard, and I look forward to a beer sometime. And so next one, thanks, Richard. So because the department wasn't prepared to sponsor ecological science, the Australian ecological science community, together with Windorah, the Windorah people as hosts, decided to run this workshop on the 3rd, I think it was the 3rd to the 6th of September, it might have been the 3rd to the 5th. I won't read them all out. Can you read all the names? That's the roll of honour, the scientific people. Well, I will read it. Richard Kingsford, Jim Puckridge, sadly now departed, Keith Walker, Julian Reid, Stuart Bunn, many of you are still here today, Peter Davies, Angela Othington, Brian Timms, Stuart Blanche, Mike Olson, Dean Martin's here, Jerry Maroulis, Brian Roberts, Grant McTainch. One of the results of that conference was to send an open letter to Howard, which no doubt you received, Howard, that open letter. And hey, don't tell me the minders kept it from you. But the recommendation was, to put it simply, no, good, 18, wow, no irrigation or other large-scale water extractions to be allowed or contemplated, and there were reasons for that. And later on that was endorsed by the Institute for Wildlife Research, the University of Sydney, the Australian Society for Limnology, the 5th Intercol Conference in Perth. Next one, thanks. We then held a rally and protest a couple of weeks after that. 127 people riding horses rode down the main street of Windorah. It was pretty fair because Windorah's only got about 80 or 90 people anyway. But they came from, as I said, from the station near and far to quite old banjo. And we had good representation of politicians, including Vaughan, Henry Palaszczuk, Tim Mulhern, and Clem Campbell. And we received great support from all those people. Federal Environment Minister Hill arrived but stayed in his motel room and watched the cricket and didn't talk to us. Or whatever it was he watched. And there was this strong message there that reinforcing the local views. Now, next one, thanks, Richard. How are we going? Yeah. Right, the draft water management plan, when it was unveiled, unfortunately was going to allocate 22,500 megalitres to water harvesting entitlement upstream. You can read the rest. So just remember that comparison. That 22,500 megalitres would fill a water hole 90 kilometres long. The hydrological modelling did show there were significant downstream effects, particularly at low flows. Next one, thanks, Richard. The Beattie and... better get through these a lot quick. The Beattie and Bligh Labor governments between them, they did a lot of work that ended up protecting the Cooper in particular, and later on with the Wild Rivers Act and plans for the Cooper, Georgina and Diamantina as well. If you can read all that,
It's very clear.
I've given a bit of a praise, you can see, to Minister Stephen Robertson, Kate Jones, Vicky Darling. And I should have included Rod Welford there. Oh, Welford's up there at the beginning. Next one, thanks. The Wild Rivers Act and the Wild Rivers Declarations, very important, I thought, and Tom has backed that with his presentation. They coordinate and trigger protections available under other legislation only when the Wild Rivers thing exists. It's like a circular process. And for instance, if you want to check it up, you can see how they lock in water take provisions. I think I've got those right there. They by circular references to the water resource plans and certain provisions of the Wild Rivers Act, and particularly Section 55 of the Water Act, which outlines where a water resource plan may not be in conflict with the Wild River Declaration. And they regulate, and particularly important, regulate and prohibit potentially damaging developments. And the elephant in the room there is mining. You see, I've given it a big capital. Yeah, Richard, the last one. Oh? Just about done. That's just about done. Or is it? Well, yeah, back in 2008, with sort of Cassandra-like prophecy, I worked out what potential threats there still were. And then in 2011, I thought they're all gone. Sadly, I was right. They were about to change in political wind direction. And now we have, as I said, all those issues were under control. One of the biggest problems is that philosophy and practice of growth, this obsession with growth that politicians of all descriptions seem to have. The last one, Richard, I think. The Newman government, oh yes, of course, he's dismantling all that. And he's got some influential friends like Noel Pearson, Marshall Langton, two spokespeople for Aboriginal issues, which I don't think reflect fully the Aboriginal issues all around Australia, and Tony Abbott, of course. And there's people in the upper catchment particularly would be delighted with this change in the wind direction from the government. And the last one, Richard, I think. Aha! Now there's the one line further on from good old Shakespeare there. There's his exhortation to the English troops outside the walls of Harfleur. Whoops, what's this? Bloody furniture.
Get going, we'll fix it.
Yeah, and yeah, there it is. If I were, I'd read it to you, except I haven't got a voice like Laurence Olivier or somebody like that, so it's better you read it yourself. Imagine Olivier or Richard Burton or one of those types reading it. But that is my exhortation. Now, I think the call of battle is here again, and we've got to toughen up and imitate the action of the tiger, conjure up the blood, disguise fair nature with hard-favoured rage, and lend the eye a terrible aspect. Thank you. Thanks, David. Good on you.
Good on you, mate.
Good on you, mate. Yeah.